Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata podcast. I am your host, Andrea Pranzatelli. Today I have a very special guest. His name is Andre T. Mitchell. He also goes by ATM as his stage name. Sometimes that's his stage name. I'm going to put his information down below. You're going to want to follow him. He is a New York City comedian. He's been doing mainly performances in New York City these days. Before we get into the podcast, I have a lot of questions for him about comedy in particular. But before you get into it, this is a podcast where I interview local New Jersey, New York City comedians, musicians, and other artists of any kind. If that's something you're interested in, don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and don't forget to comment on anything that you agree with or you disagree with as we go along the podcast. But anyways, we're going to get right into it. So, Andre.
Yes.
I have a lot of questions for you today. You're somebody, I was saying before that I really look up to you. I really respect you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And a lot of comedians, like we were just talking about our friend Tim Rager. Shout out to Tim Rager, was also on this podcast. Uh-huh. He also really respects you. So
he hasn't put me on his podcast.
So that motherfucker. That motherfucker didn't put me on his podcast either. So we're going to have a talk about that. But
I'm going to start doing people's podcasts. So if you want me on your podcast, let me know. This is the first one out here.
Really?
Far.
So this is the first Jersey one you've done?
Yes. I've had one. I had like 3 offers in New York that the scheduling didn't work out and we haven't rescheduled. And I told you the one I just kind of turned down. Yeah. But this is the first one out in Jersey. So
damn. Okay. Yep. Well, I feel very privileged to have you on here as the first one. That's exciting. So my first question for you, and I feel like this is kind of a cliche question, but so I'm sorry if it is, but I also think it's a question that I'm actually genuinely curious about your response. So the question is, why do you do comedy? Like, what is it to you? It's kind of like a complex question, I guess, but do you have like a philosophy behind it? Like, I'm doing it to change the world? Or is it like just simple? Like, I just like comedy.
You know what? It kind of is that. I mean, it evolved into that. So it started off with just something that I was interested in trying. I never thought about making a career of it. Yeah. And then, I watched a lot of stand-up before I ever did it. Yeah. I would go to sleep. If you ask my mom, I would put on like Kings of Comedy, and I would watch it every day for the whole summer. I would fall asleep to it, but I never had any interest in it. Then once I started getting more interest in it, and I started listening to the jokes that really resonated with me, they were jokes that I felt like said something about society. And I was like, wait, I can present my own philosophy on society to people, and they will listen to it if I make it funny. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of been the goal ever since. Like, how can I change a few people's minds about a subject that maybe they weren't open-minded to through humor? Yeah. Because people drop their guard down when you're making them laugh. So so comedy's kind of always been like my outlet to be like, I have this opinion that if I tell you in a normal conversation, you think I was crazy. But if I make you laugh a few times, then you'll listen to me a little bit. I like that. No, I like that it evolved into kind of like a philosophy for you, because I feel like there's 2 kinds of comics. And that's kind of my next question that I guess we kind of answered. I feel like there's 2 different kinds of comics, I guess you could say. Uh-huh. I feel like some comics are they were just born funny and like they didn't have a choice. Like they were the class clown. They just like fell into this whether they liked it or not and didn't think about it. And then there's maybe others who have like a mission behind it or whatever. Uh-huh. So that was actually my next question for you. Have you always been like a funny guy, or were you more like shy and had to like evolve into this character? So I was somewhat of a chameleon, whereas like I just kind of blended into spaces. So if there was a class clown, I never felt the need to compete. But if the class needed someone to be funny, then I always knew I could kind of step in there. My humor always came from being observational, from seeing that thing that nobody else saw or everybody else saw, but then saying that thing that nobody else thought of. So in rooms where it's a class clown, that was never necessarily needed. But in the rooms where we didn't have one, that's kind of where I always felt in. So you'll see me, if we're in a room together and no one's really leading the conversation, you'll be like, oh, you'll watch me take it over immediately. But if there's other big personalities, then I'll take the back seat and allow them to do it. And honestly, that is like, I'm learning that's such a skill that is necessary in comedy to be able to read the room. Yeah. Because that's actually one of my questions I have for you next. I think it is the next question. So this is a good segue into it. So
I'm curious to know how you would have handled this bomb that I did yesterday that I completely fucked up.
Oh yeah, Gio told me he went through as well.
So what happened was I did a show at Lemongrass, which is like a bar setup. And I actually, that's where I met you. I saw you performing there, and I remember you had handled that situation really well compared to some of the other comics. So that was I've done open mics there, but that was my first time doing a show there. And I had worked on material at open mics that week that I felt like I did really well. So I went in there with confidence, and because the way it was like set up, nobody was paying attention to me. And I at first I had confidence, and then slowly I just started losing my confidence till the point where I've never done this before, but I just walked off stage. I was he told you what happened?
No, he didn't tell me that, but that's,
he just, so like, I literally just, I felt like I was going to cry. Like, I was like, this is horrible. I don't know what to do. And I almost left like altogether, but I was like, I'm just going to watch the other comics and see how they handle it. So I'm kind of curious, how do you handle that? Two things. First of all, how do you handle like when you're losing the crowd's attention? Do you have a trick that you use? And two, if you start to feel yourself getting insecure, how do you stay strong and complete your set without like just giving up?
So it's a muscle memory thing, right? It's you're not going to figure it out on one specific set at one specific moment. It's just building your confidence over time so that you just collectively feel comfortable when you're on stage, and you just kind of never get into those situations as far as like wavering confidence. So here's a few tricks. One, whenever you do like a bar show, you got to pay attention to the audience and how they're reacting to the comedians. But 90% of the time, whenever there's a switch of comedians, they will pay attention. Whenever a host goes up and say, clap it up for this comedian, now we have your next comedian, there's a shift where people kind of stop paying attention and they want to scope out who's next. And they go through all these stereotypes of you, and they are they going to be funny? And they listen to the first few words out of your mouth. And if you can be captivating, then they'll give you a chance. So that's the first part. The second part is to make eye contact. Fuck the comedians. I can show you. I did a bar show, and I usually turn these down, but I didn't have anything that day, and I knew they was going to give me a lot of time, so I did it. It was in Denellen, like 2 weeks ago, because I ended up doing like 20.
Where in Denellen? Is it Maggie Murray's?
I don't know. It's Clint's show.
I used to live in Denellen, so I'm like, I don't know what place it is. But anyways, go on.
I can look it up for you. But so I ended up doing like 20 something minutes. So I was like, it's worth it for me to go do that much time, even if it's a bar show. All of the comedians would face the comedians and kind of side face the bar. They automatically dismiss them. You need to say, fuck the comedians.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to pay attention to the people. And then you find who's actually paying attention, and you keep eye contact with them.
I think I already fucked. Okay, I can see where I fucked that up, because the way that bar is set up, all the comics sit in front of you and all the guests sit by the bar. And I think I was looking at the comics, and then all the guests by the bar were just talking.
So if you even look at the time I did the Lemongrass, my body is kind of shifted towards
the audience.
And if I don't know if you remember, I remember that set. There was a guy who had been very, very talkative towards everybody.
Yes.
And I was making eye contact with him, and he was like, this guy's actually funny.
Yeah.
And that's because, one, I gave him that respect because people, if you don't make eye contact with them, it's easier to just kind of not pay attention to you.
I was actually thinking the other day, so I ran into him like just randomly in the city, which I thought was so funny, because I mean, I guess it's not that funny because we're out here doing it, but like there are a lot of mics in the city, so I just thought it was funny that I ran into you. But I remember on that stage thinking how comfortable I felt because I couldn't see anyone because it's so dark in there, and I'm like, this is cool. Like, I feel like I'm just by myself. Yeah. And when you're in a room where the lights are on, even at like Wawa, like you could really see everybody. It's like so intimate, and I'm so afraid to give eye contact to the people there. It's just like,
you have
my God, this is like, I'm having sex with everybody right now. This is like so intimate. Like,
it's a good analogy. But so at Greenwich, I'm used to performing at Greenwich. So I can see everybody when I'm doing the shows there.
That,
and some comedians only focus on that first section. Yeah. And what happens is the side sections kind of will veer off into their own conversations. They'll check their phone. Whereas if you watch me, I'm completely just scanning the whole time. Because, and this is something that Chris Rock mentioned that he learned from Eddie Murphy, which is he's always pacing the stage. because if he's pacing, then they don't know where you at, and they always got to keep their eyes on you. Yeah. So it keeps people attention. So that's the same thing I do with eye contact. Is if you're looking at them, it's kind of awkward for people to break that eye contact at times. So like, you're looking me in the eye, but I'm going to say, forget you, and just go back to my conversation on my phone. Yeah. And then, I'm sorry, it's a lot of, it's a complicated thing to really win people over at a bar show. And then the next thing is you need a funny joke that gets to the punchline quickly, that is simple. You don't need anything that's complicated.
Too chatty.
Yeah, you don't want it chatty. Yeah. My best jokes that I like are like long setups. I talk about race relations. I don't start off with that stuff.
At a bar show. Yeah.
I got a joke where I say I call in bomb threats at my job. It takes me 2 seconds to get to that punchline. And they say, ha, 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 I wish I could do that. And now I have a connection. Yeah. And then I build from there. And then after I've earned their trust, I can do the jokes that I prefer to do.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's like different. I have so many questions for you. They're all kind of leaking into each other. But I'll get to that one later so I don't get off track. But, I'll just jump to that question. One of my questions is, okay, so some comics, and it's funny, I'm a musician as well. So it kind of like, I hear the same thing in music as I do in comedy, and there's different opinions about this. So I'm curious to know your opinion. Do you think there is such a thing as a bad crowd? Like, so for example, as a comedian, are you like, this is my style, these are my jokes, either you fuck with me or you don't? Uh-huh. Or are you like, no, my job is to find a way to win over the crowd? Like, how's your perception?
I think it depends on where you are at in your career. Like, if you know your voice and you want to live and die by that voice, then you also have to understand that every crowd isn't your crowd. Yeah. That is true. But to me, there's also a level of like when you're in person, it's so much like it's one thing to not be your crowd when they're watching you on TV. Yeah. But in person, I feel like it's usually kind of easier to say, okay, this person is entertaining at least, right? Yeah. Like all the people that you think aren't funny when you're watching them on YouTube, you would laugh at them in person. Yeah. You at least chuckle, you'd be entertaining. So I think there is a balance of that. I try not to say that here's my definition of how I say it's a bad crowd or not. This is the standard I hold myself to. I say, if my favorite comedian was in this room without the fame, would they have been successful? If the answer in my heart is yes, then I say it wasn't a bad crowd. I'm just not good enough yet. Okay. If the answer is an honest no, and I do this with everything in life. I was going to try out for the basketball team in college, and I was going to be a walk-on. And my friend said, hey, Andre, I think all the spots are filled. I said, if Kobe tried out, would they find a spot for him? He said, yeah, they would find a spot. I said, okay, then I need to be as good as Kobe. And that's the mentality I go into it with.
That makes a lot of sense.
So if you can honestly in your heart say that your favorite comedian that you're kind of like, you aspire to be, without the fame, obviously, because if you're famous, they give you that leeway. But just their talent level, if they came in there and you feel like they would not have a good set, then that was a bad crowd.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. That's like a good way to look at it. Yeah. Yeah.
But if they would have done well, then you're just not good enough at that moment. And that should be the goal, is just to get better. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to keep that in mind. The next question I have for you on here is, so the more I get into it, so I'm new, like I've literally been doing it for a year, and not even, because I started during the pandemic. So it was during like the middle of the pandemic. I mean, there was things, Zoom shows, there were things out there, which I guess there shouldn't have been, but there were things out there. But there weren't like really consistent things. So if you really include that, then I've really only been doing it for like 6 months. If you like factor that in, I'm just learning new things every day, and I'm learning new like quote unquote rules, like the rule of 3, etc. Yeah. So my question for you, is there like a rule or a trick that you've learned, like that you've been geeking out on lately, that like really works for you, or do you kind of not really go by that sort of stuff? So sometimes when you try to follow the rules too much, you end up losing like originality, I feel like. Because like the rule of 3 is something I used to always live by. Yeah. But then what happens is every time you do that analogy, you set the crowd up to say that the first 2 will be okay and the third one will be the funny one. And you kind of write that way. Whereas like I have a joke where I had the rule of 3 and I took away a third one and just did 2. And I just made those 2 like as funny as possible. And the way that it changed the tempo of my set keeps it like unique to me. It doesn't feel like somebody else, because you heard everybody do the rule of three. So when you hear the rule of three, it feels kind of, it doesn't feel as original.
Like predictable.
It feels predictable in a way. Or like the setup when somebody voice will kind of go high, you'll be like, so, my neighbor who's a bitch, like, and you kind of switch it up.
Yeah.
So I try to see how I can add my own flavor to those
But
rules.
do you think maybe it's a matter of like, you have to learn, like people say you got to learn the rules to break them.
Yes.
Do you think maybe there was like a pro in learning these rules in the very beginning?
I think you should definitely take the steps. Yeah. It's like I use basketball as an analogy all the time.
Yeah.
You have to shoot free throws and mid-range shots before you can go shoot all these far three-pointers. And then once you can shoot the far three-pointers, you might not ever shoot a mid-range again. But those are the fundamentals into building up. So I do think it's important if you're capable. Some people stylistically just aren't even capable of following those type of guidelines. Like they're just such a unique individual that the way that they perceive comedy from day one just won't allow them to write in that format.
Yeah, I think of like Theo Von. Do you know Theo Von?
I don't know Theo Von.
He's just like, if you don't know him, I don't even know how to explain his humor, but he's like one of those people that like, they just do their own thing. They don't really write jokes. Like they're just like another creature,
See, exactly. So that person I would never try to put into that rules box. But I started off following the rules for sure. And then I kind of learned how I can break it within my own set.
So are you I'm curious now, because I didn't know you played basketball. Are you just as like dedicated to basketball as you are to comedy? Or is it like...
Well, at this point, I mean, basketball is just a hobby.
Okay.
But, when I was in basketball, I think that same work ethic kind of translated, which really helped. I was very, very dedicated to basketball when I was playing a lot. And then when I got into comedy, I was able to say like, okay, the way I work there, that's all these principles are just universal. You want to get better every day, take every opportunity. Was
there a point where you had to make a decision like, okay, I can't decide between basketball or comedy? Or?
No, those never overlapped. Basketball ended as soon as I got to college. I had the opportunity to try out. And I opted not to because I wanted to focus on schooling. And then towards the end of schooling, that's when I got into comedy. So there was never really an overlap with those things.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Like he's into two different things. Because like I do music and comedy. And like it is overwhelming to like keep up with both. But I guess the one thing about music that I have is like I've been doing it for about 10 years or so now. So it's like I'm in the flow of it more. So it's like now I'm adding this comedy thing, and it's like it feels good to be like brand new at something again, you know, to like, I don't know, to be a total beginner.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah.
And the rush of always getting better every day, because progression can get stagnant the longer you've been doing something. That happened with basketball, where it was like, when in the beginning I could learn a new move every day, and then now it's like, okay, like what do I even learn today? The getting better gets so incrementally smaller the longer you've been doing something. So starting something new is always very exciting because you get so much better so quicker in the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, this is a question I had. So we were talking before about like learning the rules and then later breaking them. Did you ever read any books that you're like, this shit helped me? Like,
yeah, I told Tim about one, Judy Carter, The Bible. And I'm currently reading another one. And with these books, like you just kind of have to take what they say
with a grain of salt.
But there's a lot of it is good, and some of it is outdated. Some of it won't work for you. Mastering Stand-Up, that's the one I'm reading now. The Complete Guide to Mastering Stand-Up. Yeah.
I definitely want to I want to find an audiobook because I'm horrible at reading. I'm not going to lie. Like I struggle to focus on reading, but I want to see if there's like anything out there converted into like an audiobook that I could listen to while I'm driving. I think it would be, like I said, like I'm just hearing these terms every day. I'm like, what did he say? What's this? What's that? So I kind of just want to like read a book or like listen to an audiobook where they just explain things in depth to me, you know? Yeah. So thanks for, I'll probably like put that in the comment or whatever they call that section below. I'll put that in there too.
Weird story. The book I'm reading now, the guy who wrote it was Tiz's professor. Tiz took a comedy writing class in college. Tiz, you know Tiz, right?
I don't.
Tiz Irie.
It sounds super familiar. I feel bad that I don't know him, but I'm like genuinely bad with names.
He's around New Jersey. You've probably seen him.
If I saw his face, I'd be like, oh yeah, that guy.
But his professor was the guy who wrote this.
No way.
Yeah.
What was he a professor of?
Like some comedy course at the college that he went to.
Okay. Oh, cool. Have you ever taken any comedy courses? Or like, no.
Learned in the streets.
I was like, I don't want to take a stand-up course, but I wouldn't be opposed to taking a improv course because I feel like crowd work is my down point.
Yeah.
And I'm like, improv is a totally different thing, but it would probably really help with crowd work to be like forced to be in a situation where like you have to just come up with everything on your feet. So I'm like, kind of like, I'm so afraid of crowd work for some reason. And I'm like kind of wondering like maybe just some kind of improv group like would be helpful for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Fortunately, like some of the studios closed down during the pandemic. But yeah, improv is definitely a good tool to have. The main thing about comedy is you have to realize that if this show doesn't make or break your career, then there's always another show.
Yeah.
And once you get that through your head, then you realize that these people you'll never see again. It's one show, and you have to be more selfish about just wanting to go up there and work on what you want to work on and saying to the audience what you want to say and then figuring it out. Because a lot of times we're a little late. We're a little reserved because we're so scared. Like this is like the biggest thing to us. Once you're able to make it to where you realize that this isn't really a big deal. Yeah. It's just a performance. You have another one tomorrow and the one after, the day after that.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. It's like we take it so seriously, but I kind of like that perception of like, be more selfish about it. It's not about how am I going to please them? It's like, well, this is me working out my shit.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I also see it the other way too. It's like it is about giving to the audience, but adapting that mindset just to get through that hump.
Yeah. And it's about giving to the audience in the long run. Yeah. Some people get so short-sighted. So like you do a show and you need to work on new stuff, but you know the old stuff will work. So you keep doing the old stuff. Yeah. Well, that's short-sighted. You're working for this audience at this moment. Sure, maybe. But you're not working towards those future audiences that need you to do longer stuff or need you to do new material. Or better material. Like, you know, you have to, I forgot which comedian said it, but you have to keep writing as if you haven't written your best joke yet. Okay. So you can't keep thinking that these old material is your best joke. You need to be like, no, I'm about to write my best joke right now.
What's your, that's a good point. Like I feel like I do, in my joke book, I do sometimes like go to my quote unquote best joke as like a security blanket. Yeah. Like I'm going to use my best. So what I've been doing is like, if I want to try out new material, I like sandwich it. I put like my most successful joke in the beginning, my most successful joke at the end, and then I put new material in the middle. So it's like, all right, I already know this works, so I can just like win them over in the beginning. If I fuck this up, I know I can like end strong. Yep. And then in the middle, I like try new stuff. Yeah. Is that kind of what you do too? Or
yeah, I think Seinfeld was one of the people that was a big proponent of doing it that way. That's the way I do it too. I like to earn some confidence in the beginning, like you said.
The only thing is the show the other day did not work out that way for me. I used in the beginning what I thought was like my best joke, and it was just so insane to me like that joke had worked really well 2 days before, and then at this show it was just like shit. I was like, oh my god.
Welcome to comedy.
It was like, yeah, it was such a but yeah, I have to, like you said, just get used to it as like, don't take it so personal. No. You know?
And once you more and more so hone in on what your voice is, then you'll more hone in on what your audience is. And then you'll realize that everything you're doing is for the people who view the world like you view the world, who wants to hear what you have to say. You're not performing for the people or getting better for the people who are going to dislike you no matter what.
That's true.
And sometimes those are the people that set your shows. Yeah. Nobody has ever walked this earth has been loved by everybody. It's impossible. It's impossible. Yeah. So you have to just be the best version of yourself. Yeah. And you have to double down and be unapologetically the best version of yourself. And the people who like who you are, they're going to come out and support you, and you're going to have that bond, and that's going to be your fandom. Yeah. And then the rest of the people can go kick rock because they don't pay your bills.
Yeah, because it's like, it's such a hard balance in the beginning because you're like trying to figure out how to make everything work, but it's like you also have to develop your voice, and it could be like a sticky line between like, okay, I'm trying to develop my voice as an artist. It's hard to know, like it's hard to know which direction to take in the beginning. You know, it's tough.
Yeah, but you'll figure it
out. My next question for you, I like this question. So, okay. I see a lot of parallels, like kind of how you were saying between like things you learned in basketball and things you learned in comedy. I'm seeing the same thing, like in the beginning of when I became a pianist, I learned a lot about myself, and I'm starting to see the same parallels in comedy. So for example, I feel like as a musician, you have to be very introspective. You have to be very open to self-criticism.
Yes.
And one like really cool thing that I remember about becoming a better musician was I started to realize that the problems that were messing up my musicianship were the same problems that was messing me up in my real life.
Yeah.
Do you find that in comedy? Like, okay, so for example, when I first started playing piano, I was so focused on like being the best and being fast, and I got an injury because, and it was almost like that injury was almost set up by my mentality or my emotions, and it was like, oh my God, this character flaw is fucking me up in my real life because I'm walking around in my real life arrogant as shit, and it fucked up my piano. And I'm like curious to know. I'm like wondering, is the same thing going to happen in comedy? Were there things in comedy that you discovered about yourself introspectively where you're like, shit, this has been fucking me up in my real life and it fucked me up in comedy? Like, is there anything like that?
I think, being too trusting, just in the real world and then in comedy. So it's just like the people around me I trust a lot. So then when you got into the comedy world, I start trusting everybody a lot because my intentions are always 100% like selfish. Like I want to be successful, but I want everyone around me to be successful. And I kind of lived in this bubble where I hadn't had to go through any of those. I didn't have to go through any of these obstacles in my personal life where my success and somebody else's success was competing. And in comedy, that started to happen where it's like, okay, you think you're on the same page, but this person really just wants to be successful. So if they can step over you to do so, they'll do it. And then it kind of start happening in my personal life as well. And I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of see how like just being a trustworthy person all around, there's extra layers of protection that I had to put up in order to make sure that I wasn't being taken advantage of.
You had to set like stricter boundaries.
Yes. And then also like the arrogance thing, like I can walk around life being like in my personal life, just very confident, borderline arrogant. I don't think arrogance is a bad thing. A lot of people don't like arrogance, which I get. I like other people who are arrogant. I like people who are like thoughtfully arrogant. Whereas like, no, you'll back it up. If you will put your money where your mouth is, then I respect you 100%. I don't say anything that I wouldn't put my money up on. If I'm like, I'm the best comedian here tonight, I have a wallet full of money that I am willing to put up at that moment in time. I don't like people who's arrogant, but they're like, they talk a lot, but they're not willing to back it up.
Not willing to like show it.
If you're willing to back it up, I think you should talk your shit nonstop.
How do you deal with like how do you deal with negative people? Like, so for example, me personally, I guess I still do. I was going to say I used to, but I guess it's something I'm still working on. If you have like friends or family in your life that's kind of like limiting you a little bit, or like saying like, oh, you shouldn't do this, get a real job, like that type of talk. I personally, I'm really sensitive to that. And I guess like when I become arrogant, that's like a defense mechanism against that. I'm just like, no, I'm fucking Andrea Pranzatelli.
Exactly.
Shut the fuck up.
Talk your shit.
Talking my shit. I am very sensitive to that, to the point where I got to a point where I had to like cut people out of my life because of it. Not because I didn't love certain people or because I didn't wish well for certain people, but just because I know myself and I know that type of stuff affects me emotionally. And I'm like, I would love to get to a point where like that just like rolls off my sleeve. Like, I'm curious how you deal with that type of thing. Yeah.
So I'm fortunate enough to not have a ton of that.
Okay.
But that's because everybody that's around me, I've always had, when you've entered my life, I've always had big goals, whether it was before comedy. So that's something you just had to accept from the very beginning, that like Andre is very goal oriented and he's very strong minded in what he's going for. But the cutting people thing off is exactly like 100% correct. I am somebody who is motivated by like people doubting me or people disliking me. So even though it hurts, that defense mechanism kicks in, and I turn that hurt into anger, and I turn that anger into fuel to work harder. So it was funny because my friend, she got a big job, and we went out to eat, And it was a few of us, and it came up during a conversation. Me and another comedian was talking that because I have a list of all of the people who've kind of like done me wrong and doubted me. And it's a physical list I keep in my wallet. And those
You keep it in your wallet?
Yes,
Wow.
it's in my wallet. Yeah.
I don't ever want to get on the list.
You won't be on the list. It's I don't put it on there like easily. I take mental notes of everything. Yeah. But to physically write it, you kind of got to take that next level of disrespect. Yeah. So those things hurt, but I try to use that hurt personally in order to fuel me. Because you're going to get hurt no matter. It's going to be hard to like, you've been on this planet for, however many years. Yeah. You've built up a personality and a connection to these people to where they can hurt you, and you're never going to get rid of that. They'll never not have that ability to hurt you. It's kind of like what you do about it and how you position yourself so that doesn't happen. That's
always been my thing. Like, you always hear people saying like, don't give a fuck what anybody thinks. And like, for the most part, I do feel that way. But there are certain people, like family, friends, like certain people that you look up to and trust, like when they're not rooting for you and when they're not on your side, like it does hurt.
It's
like
going to hurt. It's supposed to hurt.
Yeah, it hurts,
It's supposed to.
But I like that mentality of like alchemizing the negativity into something positive. That's been like kind of something on my mind. It kind of reminds, I call it like the Eminem thing. Like, cause Eminem, he like got picked on when he first started his rap career, and like he used that. He just like used that fuel to become like one of the most successful rappers in the world,
If you're able to do it. Everybody isn't capable of that, which is 100% fine. But that's the way that I've learned to kind of cope with it. Yeah. Is using that negative and trying to use that as fuel.
Here's another question I have for you. What is something, how many years have you been doing comedy actually?
It's always a weird question to answer. So I started my first time getting on stage probably was like in 2013. Okay. But it was once. And I didn't get on stage again for like another 2 years. Okay. And then even then, it was like 5 times that year. So if you go by that, I started probably about like 8 years ago, my first time getting on stage. Okay. When I start taking it seriously, consistently, would have probably been in like 2015 ish, like late 2015. So
you've been doing it for like a good 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And even with that, it's weird because once you get out to New York and you see what that New York grind is like, back when I was in Michigan and I was taking it consistently, that still was only like 2 mics a week, 3 mics a week, and those mics were 5 minutes, 7 minutes. So you're talking about 15 minutes of stage time a week. Yeah. Whereas now I'll get over an hour in stage time a week pretty easily. Yeah. So like, it's kind of hard to quantify those things, but
I know exactly what you mean. Well, it even kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning. I'm like, I technically started a year ago, but it was the pandemic.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like right now I'm at that phase where I'm getting like 2 mics a week, like that, like where you were. So I have like a long way to go. So my question for you is, when you were like in more of the beginning phases of stepping up your game, what was one, like, at what point did you notice like a big transformation? Like, or was there ever a big transformation, or was there like slow little incremental transformations?
It was just incremental every day. It was just like better my first time went pretty well. And from there it was just, I tell people this all the time. And it's when we go back to the basketball thing. When you go to work my coach told me practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice.
They say that in piano too.
Perfect. Exactly. Yeah. If somebody goes in the gym for 20 hours and they don't know what they're doing, they won't leave any better than when they came. Yeah. So I knew that going into comedy, I have to have a game plan. Mm-hmm. So I could go on stage and bomb, but my only goal was making sure that I spoke into the mic clearly. Yeah. And if I did that, I felt like I had a great performance. Okay. And I carried that every single day. I had a small thing to work on. And so I got so much better so quickly because I wasn't blindly just grabbing the mic and performing and thinking, I'm going to get better because I got on stage today. Yeah. There's a level of that happens. You do need reps, and there's a muscle memory.
The cat's right behind you peeking at you.
Hello.
I wonder if he'll get in the video. Anyways, go on.
There is a muscle memory that does come with just getting on stage. Mm-hmm. But especially in the beginning, it's like, what are you consciously working on? Mm-hmm. And for me, I was fortunate enough to just always be working on something for like those first 3-4 years, every single time I stepped on the stage. So I just kind of like just kept getting like a little bit better every single time.
That's so funny. It's like, it's crazy. All the parallels, like basketball, piano.
Yeah.
It's the same exact thing with piano. I remember like, I used to be part of this like performance group in school, and because I went to music school, and it was like we all played for each other. It was kind of like an open mic for pianists. Like it really was. Like, so we would all play for each other, and then at the end of it, we would all critique each other. Like we would say, okay, you could have done this, blah blah blah. But like the teacher who ran that course, she said every time you go in, you have to have one specific goal in mind.
Yep.
And it could be like, okay, today you're going to memorize your material, your music material. I guess you could say the same for comedy. Something I got to work on. I always use my fucking book. Like I'm using a book right now, quite frankly, for this podcast. So you might work on that, but then you can go in another time and be like, okay, I might hit all the wrong notes today, but I'm just going to work on my passion and my stage presence. And like every single time you went up, you had to have like a specific thing in mind. So it's like so true. It's like, it's not just going up there and blindly like performing your shit. It's like, you got to have something, you know, and then it'll make you feel better about the whole thing too, you know? So
I will say there's like 2 or 3 things that happened, like things I got better at that were the bigger jumps. Yeah. One was not having to do my set in order that I thought of it on stage. So I couldn't veer from the path at all. Like, cause what was happening in real time was happening in my brain at the same time. Whereas like now my brain is like 5 minutes above what I'm actually doing. 5 minutes beyond. So if I'm saying something, I'm already thinking about 5 minutes from now.
Yeah.
And that was a big, part of my development. And then also like learning how to be more relaxed. There's a period where I was like, go pretend like I'm going to talk to my little brother. Every time I used to come from work, I would go talk to my little brother and I'd have a story to tell him. It'd be a funny story and we just talk. And I started putting that in my brain. I said, when you grab that mic, you're walking into your brother's room and you're going to tell him a story. And that allowed me to kind of be more comfortable and tell and kind of like not for it to feel like a performance, but just for like a natural conversation.
That makes sense. It's so funny. Like when I ran into you in Greenwich the other day, I was running late, like I had told you. And because of that, I felt comfortable on stage because I didn't have time to think about anything. Like I was like, oh my God, I got to get there on time. And like, there was no time to plan much. Like it was just kind of like, I got to go there and do this shit. And in some weird way, it made me more relaxed. But then this fucking thing I did the other day where I bombed, I like prepared all day for it and completely fucked up. So it's like kind of interesting. It's like going in with that headspace of like, you're just talking to people. And because I was late and I was such a mess that day, I was like, I just got to go in there and talk. Like, and it kind of worked in my benefit. It was weird.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, you were checking your notes, taking breaks and stuff. So it felt very informal, which probably worked for you because it was like, I don't have to stress this. And because when you stress it, people can tell. Every single emotion that you bring onto that stage, the audience can read every single emotion.
It scares the shit out of me how good comics are at reading each other's emotions, because like I feel like I've always been like someone who could read people's emotions. And I guess that's why I like comedy, because that's like one of my skills. Like the way you were saying, you're very observant. But now I'm like in a room with like master observers and I'm not the only observant one. Like in the show yesterday, one of the comedians came up to me after and they were like, hey, were you mad at my set? And I'm like, I wasn't mad at their set. To be honest, I wasn't paying attention to their set. No offense to them, but I was mad at something. And I'm like, oh my God, how did they know? I was like, it just like kind of gave me the chills. Like comedians are hella smart. Like they're fucking, well, a lot of them are like they just are so good at reading emotions. They might misinterpret it. Like they might think it's about them, but they are so observant. It's like creepy. You know what I mean?
I mean, because you're studying at people's, you're putting out something and then you're watching people's reactions. And that's your whole job, is to just watch reactions.
Yeah. So he was just like, did I make you mad? Did I offend you? And I'm like, I felt bad. I was like, I don't want to tell him that I wasn't paying attention to his set, but I was mad. I was thinking about my set. I was like sitting there like, God, I fucked this up. And he was reading my emotions and thought I was like mad at his set or something. So it was just like insane how like observant everybody is in this field, you know? Side
note, I'm jealous that you know how to play the piano. I was trying to learn back in college, my girlfriend at the time got me a keyboard. I was okay. I knew how to play like some very, very, very basic stuff, like very basic. I always wanted to learn I want to build up to be able to play like For Elise or something like that.
Okay, yeah, you could do that. Are you still? I could teach you if you ever want to do it.
I would definitely take you up on some lessons.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's so funny. There was like a phase on YouTube, like during the pandemic, where like all these comedians were buying pianos. They're like, well, I ain't got nothing to do. All the clubs are closed. I think Mark Norman bought a piano, Theo Von bought a piano, and they all wanted to take piano lessons. And then like as soon as the pandemic, like, well, it's not really over, but as soon as it started to become like everything started opening up a little more, they like just like gave up. It was like a passing fleeting thing. But shout out to him and everybody out there. If anybody wants virtual piano lessons, I do virtual lessons. I do in-person lessons in New Jersey, but no matter where you're located, hit me up if you want some piano lessons.
So I'm assuming you're way better at piano than comedy.
Yeah. Don't worry. It's not an insult at all. Like it's 100% true. It's to the point where some people were telling me like, why don't you just do music comedy? And I'm like, I don't know if I like music comedy. I mean, like I don't dislike it. I do like Bo Burnham, but I love stand-up more than I like musical comedy. But a lot of people are like, dude, if you know how to play piano, you're an idiot for not like combining the two. So I'll think about it. But yeah, I'm like way better at piano than I am at comedy.
Yeah, I mean, it took me a while to get better at comedy than basketball. Right? Yeah, it took a long time before I was like, okay, I'm better at this now. Yeah. So I'm sorry. I figured it just made sense that if you did something for 10 years compared to 6 months. Yeah,
no, it's 100%. It's like totally true. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, how good are you at the piano? Like if you had to quantify that in comedy terms.
Okay. I don't love answering the question because no matter how I answer it, it comes across like if I say I'm bad, then it looks like I don't have confidence. But if I say I'm good, it looks like I'm arrogant. So I never know how to answer the question.
Talk your shit.
What's that?
Talk your shit.
How good am I at piano? It's really hard to quantify music because I feel like music. I feel really confident in my piano skills. I feel like I have a great stage presence. I know that about me. I have a great ear, so I'm very good. Now, obviously, there is a lot more I could be doing, but that's true for anybody. Even like comedians who have been doing it for 10 plus years, even they could always improve in some kind of way. So I don't feel like I'm done at piano by any means, but I do feel like I've reached a level where I'm like, I'm a professional. Like I can, there's no way I can consider myself a professional comedian. Like I'm a beginner, but piano, I could say like, I'm a professional at this. Yeah.
That's cool.
But that doesn't mean I'm the best professional. No, it means I still see a lot of things I could improve as a professional, but I consider myself like a professional. Yeah.
If you have to put a percentage, you're in the top blank percentage of pianists.
It's hard to say because there's so many in the world. Yep. And it also depends what field. Because like if you're talking classical, if you're talking R&B, contemporary, like
what's your specialty?
I was classically trained, but I wouldn't consider that necessarily my favorite style of music. Because it's kind of hard to answer, like even my career, like my path as a musician, because I started by ear. Like I used to just play rock music by ear and stuff like that. Then I was like, I want to learn more. And I went to school for music, didn't know how to read at all, but like was taught on the spot, like how to read. And then that's when I was classically trained. And now I use both. So I've kind of like, I guess, like developed my own little style now, like my own voice on the piano, where it's kind of like a combination of things I've learned in classical, but combined with like modern stuff as well. So yeah, I don't know. Okay. Percentage wise, I don't know if I could label myself like that. Cause like I said, I don't want to either come across as undermining myself or over.
I'm in the top.
What about comedians?
5%.
Yeah. Like how good are you at comedy?
Top 5 easily.
Comedy?
Yes.
Okay, so back it up. Remember you were saying before, if you see me perform 10 times and there's 10 comedians on each show, that's 100 total comedians. You will not see 5 comedians that were better than me. I mean, I do agree with you because like I said, I haven't seen you. I'm really sad that I had to leave. I had a date.
Oh, no, it's just the open mic. We was working on
jokes. We ran into each other in open mic and I really wanted to see him, but I had to go to a date. I say that like I had to go to a date. Like I was so excited. No, it was good. But I really wanted to stay and see you, so I hope to see you again. I've only seen you perform once at that Lemongrass, but I do remember you being like the top of the game there.
Yeah, I mean, thank you.
You're like, yeah, I know.
No, I mean, but yeah, whatever. But no, yeah, if to show you that I'm comfortable talking my shit, and I might say their percentage is higher, but I won't do that. 5% easily, I would say for myself.
I definitely can't say that about piano because I think there's so many pianists. Like I think,
but that helps and hurts.
What that helps or hurts?
That helps and hurts.
I feel like there's way more musicians than there are comedians. I could confidently say that. I mean, like, because I like really truly, because like there may not be a huge stand-up game in like Russia, China, in like all these different countries.
And
like,
it's more accessible.
Yeah. Piano, like Russia, China, like there's some of the best fucking pianists. So there's no fucking way I could say that I'm in the top 5%. But you know, out of my peers, I guess you could say, I would say I'm up there. But it also depends like how you measure what's good, because
it's subjective.
It's subjective in music, because if you're talking technically speaking, like how fast am I know there's going to be some pianists that are way better than me, but what I have like a lot of confidence in is my ability to get the message across emotionally on the piano. That's where I have my confidence. And that's something I've had to learn over time, because I used to be like technical, like trying to be the fastest. And, you know, as I said to you before, I ended up injuring myself, which completely shifted my perspective. And I was like, all right. And then I started really like getting into like the emotional part of it. So, but it's like same with comedy too. It's like, how do you characterize who's the best?
No,
you know?
I mean, you really truly can't.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a personal preference. Yeah. But, you know, coming from something that was competitive, which was more measurable, I found that it helped with my confidence in performing, like when going on stage and just feeling confident that I'll do well. Because in basketball, what happened is if you play enough basketball and pick up, you kind of get a feel for, on average, how good you are. You're like, there's never been a court where I wasn't one of the top 3 or whatever. And you do this enough to where in your head, like with me, like as a very like numerical person, or like really like looking at percentages and stuff, I'm like, I'm always in the top 10%, 5%, 1% in basketball. And what that did is give me confidence when I step onto a new court, that I'm like, statistically speaking, the chances of me not being like one of the best here is very improbable based on my past success. So that happens with comedy now, where I'm like, okay, I was always the best here, and I was the best here, and I was the best here, or I was one of the best here, I was one of the best here. And then you get this average of sense. Statistically speaking, now that I've performed 100 shows, there was only a few times where I felt like I wasn't the best. So when I do this next show, statistically speaking, it's very improbable that I'm not going to be one of the best.
That makes sense, because I do feel like in comedy in particular, it is like the numbers of people doing it are a lot smaller than music, to the point where like the best, like let's put it this way, the best of the best in comedians, like we know them all because they're all on TV.
Yeah.
We don't know all the best of pianists. Some of them never made it because there's so many that are so good. True. You know? But that, that's good to know. Like that's good that you're
and you can use that without necessarily having to compare it to other people. If you just do the law of averages of like having good performances. Yeah. If you're like, I had 10 great performances, 1 bad one. Yeah. Statistically speaking, the chances of me having a good performance at this show tonight is way higher than me having a bad performance. Therefore, there's not a lot to worry about. I shouldn't be nervous about having a bad performance, because my track record shows that I'm more than likely will have a good performance.
What do you think about comics or people, basketball players, comics, whoever? What do you think about comics who are having bad performances consistently? Okay, so for example, I have a friend who, he's a comic, and he's like, he hasn't been going out as much. Like, and I'm like, dude, what happened? Like, you just disappeared. He's like, I never get booked on shows. He's like, they don't like me, blah, blah, blah. They pick favorites. And I tried to like challenge him a little bit. I was like, yeah, they pick favorites, but maybe they're picking those favorites because their jokes are good, you know. And I'm trying to, I'm trying to like not to be mean, but I was trying to give tough love, like get back out there, you know, don't give up. I was like, don't you think like don't you think the way to like get better is to try to figure out how to conquer this situation so you're not getting booked at shows? Like, look at your shit. So what do you think about that mentality of like certain people who are kind of like blaming the finger at something else? Like, I'm not getting booked at shows because they're the favorites, like, as opposed to just being introspective, like I was saying.
Everything in my life is introspective. Yeah. Everything that ever goes wrong is my fault. Because if I blame it on something else, then that's me relinquishing any control I have on it and me being able to affect it in the future. Mm-hmm. I only get one life. I'm not going to go through it being like, don't get me wrong. Things happen to us. Yeah. Things happen to us that we have no control over. Yeah. And that's not what I'm saying. But me, I personally like to view pretty much everything as a learning opportunity on how I could get better. Like if somebody crashed into my car and they rear-ended me, I should be checking my back mirror more often. So if somebody's going to rear me, maybe rear-end me, maybe I have a better chance of getting out the way. Yeah. They rear-ended me. I did nothing wrong. I was just driving normally. Yeah. They were, drunk or whatever. But I'll flip that blame, not to, feel bad on myself or anything like that. I'm not going to beat myself up on it. Yeah. But I'm just going to say, Andre, I believe you are great and you can do whatever you put your mind to. And this is a situation which could have turned out really bad. So in the future, so you don't even get put in this situation, how can we learn from this one so you can do better in the future? So I approach comedy with that same perspective that I would be way more introspective and saying, okay, what could I be doing better? But there's a lot wrong in that situation. There's a lot wrong with what you just said. One, when you said they're picking favorites, you're talking about a specific group. And the problem that a lot of these comedians have is that they got to stay in these specific groups. They don't want to branch out. Go to a different group. Yeah. Go to New York. Go to South Brunswick. Yeah. Go to upstate New York. Yeah. Go to Philadelphia. There's so many comedy scenes and you'd rather kind of like just stick around. You can't say that you see me, especially when I was in Jersey, you didn't see me at the same mics often.
I was actually wondering, was it you that took a trip to California to do some mics? Was that you?
Yo, it was a festival, but yeah.
So do you notice any difference between do you notice big differences between the comedians in Jersey versus New York versus California? Like their work ethic, their style? Like, is there like a prototype, like, oh, this is a Jersey comic, this is a New York comic, this is a California comic, or are they all different?
So the thing about the Cali was that it was a festival, so there was people from all over. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to put, but Cali in specific, a lot of people are more obsessed with being characters on stage than like actual like joke writing. So
they're more like actors.
They're more actors. Yeah. New York is very joke writing and it's very structured. Mm-hmm. It's rule of threes and misdirections and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it can kind of be hard to stand out. Jersey is kind of like a grassroots thing, but work ethic wise, I feel like Jersey comedians aren't there. I feel like a lot of Jersey comedians don't think big picture and a lot of them are complacent, if I'm gonna be honest. A lot of them are like, I got a group of friends and everybody wants to get something different out of comedy. So this isn't me shitting on people at all. Yeah. But New York is like grind too much. Like
we're here to,
It's a little bit too much because people are so happy in New York to do 3 mics, 4 mics, like the mic you did. You had to leave. You had a date. I get it. I'm not shitting on you at all. When I go to a mic, I need to see everybody that was there. I was at that mic, not to big myself up, but I was the most established comedian at that mic. Yeah. People left that mic to go do another mic rather than sit there and watch and say, let's see what he does. Let's see how he handles this room. Let's see his energy where I can kind of see it right now for free. That's the things I did. There were more established comedians than me at a mic. I didn't run to somewhere else to go work on my same 5 minutes. Yeah. You don't even have enough time to better your 5 minutes when you go mic to mic. You need time to digest it and get better.
I see what you're saying because it's like it's kind of like you were saying. Maybe in New Jersey we're a little lazier and more complacent, but like a little of that would do you well in New York. Just a pinch, just a pinch. Yes. Like to not. In my defense, I actually really wanted to stay.
No, I'm not.
But because I wanted to see the other comics, I really wanted to see you. But I see what you're saying. It's kind of like rush to this mic, rush to that mic. And it's like, when did you have time to process like how you felt about your set?
Exactly.
Like you just rush to the next mic and do what? The same exact thing?
Exactly.
Like maybe take a minute, like whatever, get a slice of pizza and get your notebook out, write your notes. Like, okay, I could have done this better. Be introspective. Like, you know what I mean? And you're right. If you're just like running from thing to thing, you don't have time to process.
I see so many people and they get so many shows and they do the same joke, which is fine. Yeah. Like I'm a big proponent of doing these same jokes and stuff, but it's like there's, they miss those opportunities to even make the small tweaks because they're always running from place to place to place. Whereas like I like the time to be able to sit back and see what's going on. And I love to be able to watch my peers. Yeah. I need to see if there's a comedian that I haven't seen, I have to watch them at least once. I have to see what they're doing. I have to see what their style is. What techniques are they using? What subject matters are they talking about? How can I sit here and tell you honestly, I think I'm in the top 5% when I haven't seen what's out there? That would be me deflecting, trying to stay in my own little bubble, which is perfectly fine. If that's the way you have to get through comedy, that's fine. But my approach is I want to see everything so I can learn from it, so I can see what's out there, so I can see how I can get better. You can learn the best things from, the most unsuspecting teachers. Yeah. You'll be like, oh, he did that. He's just the open micer or whatever. But he did this, and I haven't seen even some of the bigger names do this. And I think that's a cool thing that he just did. I hear a lot of jokes where I'm like, that's a great joke. I'm like, that joke, and people, it's controversial, but I'll hear a joke from like an open mic where I'll be like, that joke is better than a lot of stuff that's on TV. Will this person ever get on TV? Time will tell. Do people view this was their whole set like that? Probably not. But they had one joke that was great. And that inspires me because you can see greatness at all levels. And I have to stay at these mics to kind of absorb that so I can get better.
Am I allowed to ask you like what some of your long-term plans are? Like, do you plan on like, do you want to eventually get on Netflix? Like, I don't know if you're open to talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
Because the only reason I ask is like, if you're open to talk about it, because I remember at one point here I was like just totally eavesdropping on your conversation with Tim. And I heard you saying something like, I don't bother sharing my plans with people because I don't want to be limited. I just like focus on my shit. So
yeah, I mean, some people so here's the thing. And I learned, from watching interviews and, just studying other people who've been great at their professions. Mm-hmm. If your goals are big enough, people will think you're crazy, get intimidated. And I'm okay with that. You can just make it to my list if you doubt me. But I want to be considered, the best of my generation. Like that's a goal of mine. I'm like, I want to be the best of my generation. I want to go down as like my generation argues for me over people of past generations. Mm-hmm. And and I'm just going to be like, no, you can't compare the generations. There were different times. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do that speech that you give. But that's where I don't want to I don't think I could ever, because of generational gaps, I don't think people are supposed to say that I'm going to be better than whoever you think is the GOAT now or the GOAT then. But to say like during this time period, Andre had a run that he was like, he was the best. That's the goal, to kind of start getting put in that conversation, because it's like, who is it going to be? Right. We don't know. There's no, like, it kind of stopped.
Who do you think is right now? Like, who do you think like right now is the best?
Well, I mean, people probably would give it. I think most people say Chappelle. I think he would be the best. Mark is like huge in like the New York comedians.
That's what I'm wondering. Like who's the next now? Like, I'm wondering if Mark is the next now. Dave Chappelle is like, he's been the best for like 10 years now. Like 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. Me. Like that's the goal.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, because I don't think there's somebody who's done it. I don't think I won't say specific names, but I don't think there's somebody out right now who isn't in that conversation yet, but has like that special where you're like, okay, they're starting to make their case. Yeah. I don't think people have been making their case recently. I think it's been like all of the old heads just kind of confirming that they're the best. The Dave Chappelle's, the Chris Rocks.
What like constitutes as one of the best? Like, meaning they have like the most controversial material?
It's very subjective for sure. Yeah. By my standard of comedy, it's not necessarily controversial, but that you do talk about something of substance. Yeah. Not just being funny. Yeah. Unless you're just so hilarious that you don't have to talk. I think that's where like so hilariously universal. I think that's where like Kevin Hart gets his fame from. He doesn't really talk about anything of like political consequence or anything like that. But he's just so universally hilarious that it works out for him to be this mega star.
Yeah.
Whereas like the people that I really looked up to, like the Carlins, the Rocks, the Chappelles, they kind of talk about something in society that gives them that edge as well. But I mean, it's all subjective, and I live in a comedy bubble where I see certain things, and that's the standard I set my eyes on, and other people live in different bubbles where they set their eyes on different standards. So it's kind of hard to compare two different people with two different standards.
Yeah, it's like, and
say you're better, but we're measuring it differently.
Yeah, it's really hard. You're right. It's really hard to say like who's the best right now because everyone has like a different thing. I think I don't know how. Like I like the classic joke writers. I would think Mark Norman is more of like that classic joke writer type.
Yeah.
But I also love like Bill Burr and like Tim Dillon, those type of people. I don't even like, I wouldn't say they're classic joke writers. They're more like ranters. Like they just like find a subject that pisses them off and they just like dig in. Like they just go deep, which I love too. I would love to like start playing around with that type of humor. Well, how would you say your humor is? Are you more like joke writey specific, or are you more like topic? You're more like get deep in the topic, or you mix it up?
I think it's a mix. I don't think I've have enough time to really have like narrowed down and just say, I'm going to just double down, triple down on this. I've been just trying a whole lot of different things. I have jokes that kind of are formatted different ways.
Yeah.
So some are just longer, trying to dig into this topic. I don't like to just get into a subject and get out of it real quick though. I will say that even the jokes I do that does that, the jokes that I have that do get in and get out really quickly, they kind of feel like unfulfilling to me.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, I need to change this eventually.
Yeah. Man, I can't wait to see you perform again because I've technically only seen you perform once. All the times I've run into you, I've just seen you, and I've only seen you, perform once. So
you're not missing out on anything.
I'll have to keep an eye on your Instagram and see like when your performances are. Yeah. I do have one more question for you. We try to keep the podcast under an hour, and I think we just went about an hour. So one last question before we end the podcast. I did a podcast last week, and I asked the guests like, "Hey, give me questions," and someone asked me this question, and I was like kind of stumped for an answer. So I'm just going to kind of share the question with you. So they're also a stand-up comic. Their name's Jordan. So they had asked me, because they know I'm always like posting healthy food on my Instagram stories and everything. So he asked me like, do you think eating healthy and living a healthy lifestyle helps your comedy? And I was like, honestly, I don't know, because some of my favorite comics are not healthy at all. Like Tim Dillon, he's obese. I love Miss Pat. Do you know Miss Pat?
Yeah.
She's like, she's a heavy woman. She like always talks about her Chick-fil-A addiction. Dave Chappelle smokes cigarettes. So I'm just like, I believe in living a healthy lifestyle. It makes me feel good, but I can't honestly say like, I don't really know. Like, I'm like, does being healthy affect you? Like, so like, for example, if someone like Miss Pat suddenly got healthy, would that make her less funny? Or would she have a whole new humor that she would tap into? Like, what's your opinion? What's your opinion on that? Do you think health impacts comedy, or it's like totally not related? Not
in the sense of like being funny. I think it might impact it in a sense of being able to be consistent, like getting on stage and stuff. So you'll notice, like Kevin Hart was a big person who was saying this. So he's like, yo, and I'm doing all of these tours and these theaters and all this traveling. Like it takes a toll on your body. Like when you're in a room and it's a lot of people, the adrenaline and the emotion and that energy that you're trying to harness is tiring. Like, even Broadway, I did like a 20+ minute set the other day, and it was like 150 people in there. And it was like a 20-something minute set, and it felt like exhausting performing for that. So I can't imagine somebody that's doing an hour in front of like physical comedy in front of 20,000 people
every single night, multiple times a night.
Exactly. And traveling on a plane and not getting good sleep.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, but a lot of the people that you might say like are not as healthy, they probably figure out a balance for that. They don't perform every night, or their body can sustain that better than, because we got different bodies, right? I know people that's heavier than me who play basketball, just as much, but don't have any of the injuries that I get from being overweight. Their body structure is just able to sustain that.
It's
a little
insane,
bit better.
like how different everybody is. Like I was telling him, I was like, I think it's so individualized because like I said, some of my favorite comics are overweight. So I can't say that eating healthy makes me funny. All I know is that me personally, I'm such a sensitive person physically, emotionally, physically, but like even physically, like if I have a hangover, it'll fuck up my whole next day. Like if I eat something that makes me feel bloated, it'll fuck up my confidence. So I'm just like, I have to take care of my health because it impacts like the whole big picture. Like I might stay in bed and not do a mic at all if I feel like shit the next day. So I'm like, I got to be on my game. But there's some people out there that like Joey Diaz, Joey Diaz, like he's not healthy. Like, he does drugs and smokes cigars. He's like 400 pounds. Like, so it's like, and he's killing it. So it's like, I can't fucking say.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue the opposite in some situations where it's like, the fact that I'm going to be able to get a slice of pizza after this performance is more motivating to me than if I was going to get an apple. Yeah. Right. Like, to be like, oh, let me grab this slice is like a bigger pick me up for my show than a healthy salad would have been. Yeah. Like, that food, the girls are very like love, like being like getting excited about food. Like I wish I knew this when I was dating way back in the day. Like if you feed a girl, then you're just set. Like you just have to feed her and then you don't have to do anything else but just like have food. Like girls love being fed. I love being fed too. Yeah. But every relationship I've been in,
like cooking for your woman, you mean?
Or just picking her up some food. Yeah. Like girls really love food.
You hear that? Get some food for your woman.
Get some food.
Deliver some food for me.
Deliver some for
I don't
her.
have a boyfriend, so feed me.
Feed her as well. So like, but that like I'll watch my girlfriend mood change so quickly when I get her food. But something's fulfilling about junk food that might give people a boost when they're going on stage or getting off stage.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
That healthy food wouldn't give you.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, healthy food is more so one of those like long-term things. Yeah. It's like in the moment, it's like, what the fuck is this? But in the big picture, you feel better. But you're right. Like in the moment to like get the fucking shit going, it's like you need an espresso shot or you remember, something.
Like in middle school or elementary, and it was like we're having a pizza party on Friday.
Oh yeah.
Like how exciting pizza parties were. Like how pumped you got.
Yeah.
You'll never do that.
I want a pizza party right now. That sounds awesome.
Exactly. You'll never do that for a chicken salad.
Yeah. Oh, you're like, we're gonna have a chicken salad party.
You would never do it
yourself.
So I think it, short term, I think it could be helpful for people who eat bad. Now, I'm not condoning people eat bad, but I'm just saying.
I just know like obviously if you're an athlete, this is going to be a different conversation. Yeah. But I just know in comedy, I really don't think you necessarily need to be healthy to be a good comedian. I think it really just depends on the individual. Like I know me, I don't want to get out of bed if I don't feel good. So I have to eat healthy because I'm just so sensitive. But if, like you were saying, certain bodies can withhold certain things longer, maybe not. I don't, really don't fucking know. Anyways, we're going to end it podcast right here, but I'm so happy to have him here today. He was a very interesting guest. Before we end the podcast, don't forget to follow him. Do you want to tell them where they could stalk you? And
Instagram is the best. Andre_T_Mitchell. I know that's a lot of underscores, but that's it.
I'll include a link below for you guys can find it easier. But yeah, you're going to want to check him out. And if you're from New York, you might want to check out some of his upcoming shows. And this is the Pranzata podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit like and comment on anything that we talked about today. If you want to add to the conversation, agree, disagree. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.